My name is Andy Weaver. I'm one of the instructors for MicroAssist, and I tend to be teaching most of the applications that we do. And so our purpose here is to illustrate the point of what a virtual class is like. We think that there are students avoiding taking virtual sessions. They're sort of waiting for classroom sessions to resume. I just want to use a simple Excel example for this purpose. This is a routine thing, very like I would do normally in a classroom. And the purpose is to simply illustrate. One of my associates will ask a question at the appropriate time, and you'll see how I can interact, how easily that is done. And so you'll get a sense that maybe this is worth doing, that a virtual class is turning out to be about the same as a real one, where we're all together in the same room. Normally, I would leave the microphones for all the students open. The student individually can control whether they can be heard or not. But if they want to ask me a question, they just enable their microphone and talk, just like they would do in a classroom. What I'm going to do is share my screen here so that you'll be able to see my Excel file that I'm going to work in. You'll now see Excel. This is a simple little demonstration file, very much like we use in a normal class. The purpose of this is simply to illustrate one of the standard things that we talk about. We need to start generating some formulas. Before this, we have already explored the idea of adding values together. So we have seen that you could take a value like this one and add it to one like this and one like this, just using plus signs. And we use the cell references to do that so that the thing is dynamic, so that as these values change, the formulas update. That's the magic of Excel, of course. And so we're now exploring what to do if things are just a little too big to make it worthwhile to do individual cell references. Add this to that, to this, to this, to this, to this, gets too tedious, let alone something as big as this. So we're starting to talk about the concept of a range. A range runs, we can say, everything from here to here. And when we do that, we can include all those cells like this. And when I do this, the idea is that I can express this concept much more briefly than an individual listing of all these cells. I can simply use the cell on one end, in this case, B4, and the cell on the other end, B27, with a colon in between. So B4 colon B27 would mean to Excel all those cells, include all the stuff in between. And then we can use a function to solve that addition. Now, we would have done this already. This function we would have seen prior to this point in the class. The sum function works perfectly. And I could type equal sum and then select these cells, and that would complete this formula down here. But because this is so common, what I wanted to show you was that we have a magic button. Excel has automated this kind of formula because this one is far and away the most common formula you'll ever do in Excel. So what I want is to use this button right here. This Autosum, it's called. The Greek letter sigma is used for summation in mathematics, so that's why we see it there. And if I click that, we'll discover that Excel will automatically detect all those cells above that cell and select them for us. It ignores this title because that's text. These are all numbers. And so, sure enough, there's the formula. It's all automatic. And I can simply hit enter, and we've got the answer. Now, the first thing to explore, we have seen this prior to this point in the class, also, is that we can copy a formula like this across a worksheet. And when we do that, the cell references, since they are the normal cell references, will copy relatively. So if we copy this value right here, which we can do by right-clicking and copy, or this copy right here, or Control-C, any of those things, if I simply use Control-C and then choose this spot and right-click and paste, or choose paste there, or Control-V, we'll discover that I get the new formula. And you'll notice that this one, everything is in column C, which is what we'd want. It just assumes that when I copy something that where all the cell references are column B, and I copy it one cell to the right, everything changes to column C. Perfect. It's exactly what we want. And 99% of the time, when we copy formulas, that's exactly the behavior we want. And so that's the default that we get. All right, now because we copy things across worksheets frequently, they've made that simpler too. Instead of having to copy this and then select the cells where I want it to go and then paste, I can simply use this lower right-hand corner right here. When I point to that little green square, I get a black cross cursor, and I can simply drag the formula. And when I do that, this means, of course, the cell column isn't wide enough. I thought I had set that up already. I had to widen those a little bit. This formula has copied relatively. So this was all column C. Now that's all column D. This is column E. And this one over here, which I copied also, because it soon will have numbers in it, is column F. Just what it should be. It's adding up everything. Now everything is empty, so that's all zero. So that's what the sum I get. But that will quickly update when I complete these others. All right, so then up here, this total is going to be the sum of these four numbers over here. So that'll be a range also, the sum of B4 to E4. Okay, well, again, the magic button up here, the sigma, will work. How did it know that it should find the numbers over here when down at the bottom it looked up? Well, it actually did the same thing. Here, it also looked up. Didn't find any numbers up there. So then it says, oh, okay, the numbers must be over here to the left, because that's the most common alternative. And sure enough, it found four numbers over here. And so it selected them, ignored this title again, this name, it's text over there. So it found all the numbers, and that's what I get. So this also is correct. And I can hit enter. So that answer is the correct answer. Now, I need to copy this downward. So I could always use this lower right-hand corner and drag it all the way to the bottom. And that will always work. And in a small worksheet, that's what I do probably. But it might be that the bottom row is way down there somewhere, 100 rows, 1,000 rows, who knows? And because of that, it's time-consuming to drag this thing. And so they've automated something else now. If I point to that lower right-hand corner, I can double click. And if I do that, it will automatically copy downward. How did it know how far to go? Well, it did it the same way you would have done it if you'd been dragging it down here. That's where the stuff runs out. That's the last of the data. And so it stops there. And the formula that I'd copied over from here now has updated to show me the grand total down here. Okay, so this relative copying idea works wonderfully most of the time when we're trying to understand the copying of formulas. Cell references will copy relatively because that's just the normal behavior. But then we want to illustrate a situation where that doesn't work, where we have an exception to the magic of relative copying. And here is a very common example. I have a situation where I'm now trying to compute the commission we're going to pay these salespeople here. All right, and the commission is going to be computed as this number right here, the total sales, times this commission rate that's sitting up here, this 4%. Okay, so now let's just do this the way it would seem we should do this. I'm going to type an equal sign, because we always do that to start a formula. Then I need this cell reference right here, which I can do by clicking F4. I find that more accurate than typing, at least for me. So I tend to click on cell references instead of typing them. In any case, F4 is what I need. And then we're going to do some multiplication. That's an asterisk, as we have previously seen. And so that's going to be, take the value in F4 and multiply it times this value, the value in J3. Okay. And if I hit enter, that's correct. This is the correct commission for this first person. Perfect. Okay, so now the idea is I'm going to copy this downward, just like everything else. But when I do that, it doesn't work. And the problem is we need to understand carefully why this didn't work. This formula, F4 times J3, this times that, when it copied relatively, just the way formulas always do. And so it became F5, which is what we want, times J4. Uh-oh. It copied this value this cell reference, relatively also. No, that's not what we want. This part worked perfectly. We do want this cell reference to copy relatively. But that one has to stay the same. And so when we copy this times that, we can see that we have a problem coming. This is the way you solve problems like this one. You need to anticipate the issue. We have a formula that we're going to copy that involves the reference to a single cell. Whenever that happens, when we copy the formula, it's going to blow up like this, because the single cell reference will copy relatively also. So our problem is we need to specify in our original formula, the one we're going to copy, that this cell reference needs to be treated absolutely instead. We're going to copy this formula downward, but I don't want this cell reference to change. And so I'm going to insert a piece of punctuation in this cell reference here, J3. I'm going to do something now that will explain to Excel that this cell reference should not be changed. It's the 3 that changed to 4 that I'm trying to prevent. So I do that by inserting a $sign right here. Now, the dollar sign is just punctuation. Any symbol could have been used. A dollar sign got used by the guy who wrote the first one of these programs, by VisiCalc, it was called, many years ago. And every spreadsheet program I've ever seen ever since has just used the same thing, because it just works. It's a symbol that you're not going to type for any other reason in a formula like this. And so all it means is when we copy this formula downward, do not change the 3. Cool. If I hit enter, it doesn't change the answer I get. But the behavior I get when I copy the formula downward is now completely different. Now, when it copies, yes, did you have a question?
Andy, how do you decide whether to put the dollar sign in front of the J or the 3?
Okay. That's an important question. The issue here, well, first let me show you what happened. This became this F4 times J3. When it copied, came F5, which is what I wanted, but still J3. Cool. All right. Now the question was, why did I put the dollar sign there instead of here, or perhaps including both of them, which is also possible? I could have put another dollar sign right there. So a cell reference like this one is also valid. The reason I didn't bother with the dollar sign in front of the J is that I knew I was going to copy the formula only downward. And when you copy a formula downward, it changes only the row numbers in the cell references. And so it was only this 3 that I needed to preserve. And so the dollar sign in front of the 3 does that. The one in front of the J doesn't hurt anything, but it wasn't necessary because the J wasn't going to change anyhow. I'm only copying vertically, and that only changes row numbers in the cell references. The dollar sign in front of the J would be important if I was going to copy the formula this way, horizontally. Because when I do that, just like happened down here, in this case, when I copied this formula across, the formula said all the cell references were B's. When I copied it one column to the right, they all became C's. That was exactly what I wanted here. In this case, I knew I wasn't going to copy this formula across, so I didn't need the cell reference anchor in front of the J. It just saved a little time. I didn't need to put it there. Wouldn't have hurt anything if it was there. Yes.
Yeah, that was my question, that it wouldn't have hurt anything.
It wouldn't have hurt anything at all to put it there. Let me show you that.
Go ahead.
Yes. If I do that, now that both dollar signs are in there, and I copy it downward, I get the same result.
Okay.
All of these are simply still J3, which is the important part, because the J wasn't going to change anyhow. It was J3 the first time, too. So the dollar sign in front of the J didn't make any difference. Doesn't hurt anything. And in fact, there is a quick way to insert dollar signs if you'd rather not type them. This keyboard has a function key F4. And when you put your cursor in a cell reference and hit F4, we'll insert both dollar signs for you in that cell reference. That would be fine. I could leave it like that. I'd find if I hit F4 a second time, it would give me only the second dollar sign. If I clicked it a third time, it would give me only the first one. And once more, it would remove the dollar signs. So you can cycle through all the possibilities. There are times when it's important to have the dollar sign in front of the J and not in front of the 3. And there are times, like we saw, when I didn't need it in front of the J, but I did need it in front of the 3. And there are times when you don't want any dollar signs at all, like when we were copying things normally. So you can do this however it's comfortable for you to do. Just realize that you don't need the dollar sign in front of the J to make this particular example, work. Okay? Have we answered your question?
Yeah. And I guess worst case, you experiment with both ways until you get the formula right.
Yeah, that'll work, always. You can always experiment with a formula, particularly when you're going to copy it like this. It doesn't hurt anything if it blows up in your face, just like it did a minute ago. When I got all zeros down here, you go, oh, shoot, I forgot. I need an absolute cell reference. And you can go back here and fix the formula, the dollar sign in, and copy it again. Okay. Seeing it coming simply saves a step. That's all. So again, the most common time this arises is just what we were doing here. We're writing a formula that we're going to copy. You always know that you're going to copy something when you're writing it. So you know it's going to be copied, and yet it involves a reference to a single cell. Whenever that happens, you can anticipate a little alarm bell ought to go off to say, oh, that is going to require an absolute cell reference. Just do it in the first place, and then it just works. If it doesn't, okay, you go, oops, and fix it. Do it again. So it's not a big price you pay by not seeing it coming. It doesn't hurt anything except, well, we got a little more work. Okay?
Makes
Now,
sense.
I think that's enough. We aren't trying to do an Excel lesson here. I just wanted to show you how easily my associate and I were able to communicate with each other and how easily he could insert a question into what I was doing and let me respond. And so we can always do that with any student, with any question. And so it really is just the same as if we were standing next to each other in the classroom. And that's what we were trying to show you. So please don't don't avoid one of these virtual sessions if you're concerned that it's just going to be too impersonal, too disconnected for you to get an effective result. Because I think you'll discover, if you try one out, that it feels much the same. And that's all we were trying to show you.